Hey, DawgNation, it's Brandon Adams, the host of DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Hope you had a great weekend. I am excited about a great week upcoming. We have finally made it. We have turned the corner on the winter. We talked about this a little bit on Friday, and we now put all of our attention towards Georgia spring practice, which actually begins tomorrow. So we're going to have a great week this week, kind of looking ahead to the 2018 season and some of those position battles that will start to take shape starting this week with a Georgia spring practice. It's great to have Chip Towers here today on DawgNation Daily to kind of do some of that. We'll also begin our show with a former Georgia great bragging on what he thinks could be a breakout player on the 2018 team. And also, by the way, Georgia picks up a commitment over the weekend as well. So it's a busy edition of our program. We're glad you're with us as DawgNation Daily begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Georgia does get a commitment over the weekend. We'll talk about that coming up in a few minutes here today on DawgNation Daily. But I kind of want to begin the week by setting the stage for spring practice here in 2018, which for Georgia starts tomorrow as I record this, of course, here on a Monday morning. And we kind of know the drill when it comes to a Georgia spring practice. You know, there are those moments in which we see some evidence of a guy here and there that may be able to break out in a big way in the upcoming season. And sometimes these are false positives. We can all sort of joke about what we've seen in the past of guys we thought from a G-Day performance might go on to have a great season and ultimately doesn't really happen. Normally it's because there just aren't enough footballs to go around. You know, we think about touches for this wide receiver, touches for that running back, and get the tight ends more involved and kind of everything else. And when it's all said and done, you know, Georgia's not one of these teams that runs 100 plays a game, so there's not necessarily room for everybody to get the offensive touches that we want them to get. But nonetheless, that is a big part of the conversation when it comes to spring practice of, hey, who from last year's team may be ready to take another big step forward in 2018, especially at a time when Georgia has so many, hot, well-regarded incoming freshmen. Sometimes it's those guys in the second year of a program who are actually the ones that take the biggest leap forward, not just on offense, but defense, kind of everything in between. Let me focus on one of those guys just for a moment because y'all know how much fun we all had at DawgNation Appreciation on Thursday. Either you were lucky enough to be there with us or you weren't. The fact of the matter is it was, I think, the biggest and most sensational event that DawgNation's ever done, DawgNation Daily's ever been a part of. And one of the ways in which it was great is if you walk around that ballroom floor, that concert hall floor before this thing started, there were all kinds of just former Georgia players just sort of walking around, congregating, hanging out, talking to whoever happened to be there. It was really kind of a weird opportunity to kind of rub elbows and bump into some former Georgia greats. Jeff Sintel, I thought, did a really good job of doing this with his sort of behind-the-scenes Facebook Live, and one of the guys he bumped into was former Georgia wide receiver Terrence Edwards. Y'all know here on DawgNation Daily, we love Terrence. We think he was a great receiver at Georgia. We also think he's a good wide receivers coach in terms of those personal instruction type situations. Right now, he's working with a lot of current Georgia players individually. He's working with Tyler Simmons, the former wide receiver out of McEachern. He's working with Trey Blunt, former wide receiver out of Pace Academy. He's even doing some work with a defensive back, Chris Smith. He's working with these guys, and Jeff Sintel asked Terrence Edwards about Trey Blunt in particular. Blunt going into his second year at the Georgia program, what Terrence Edwards had liked about Trey Blunt and how far he'd seen him come in his development as a wide receiver. And if you're a Georgia fan thinking about who can make a big impact in 2018, maybe you leave a little room for Mr. Blunt here. Here's Terrence Edwards to explain why.
I was telling Trey and his father yesterday that we work on whip routes, change the directions, and Trey would fall every time running to change the direction of routes. And now he's up on his feet, getting in and out of breaks just as fast. And I'm telling people are sleeping on Trey right now.
I got to tell you, I think that the sort of hip-hop vibe there underneath the music for a DawgNation Appreciation, I think that works pretty well for DawgNation Daily. Maybe we need to add that more into what we're doing here. But anyway, the interview there takes place with Jeff Sintel before DawgNation Appreciation starts. That's why you kind of hear the house music kind of going on above you. But it's what Edwards says about Blunt that's the most important there. This is a guy whose agility is getting better. This is a guy who's able to stay on his feet during these kind of drills. He's the kind of guy that's more comfortable doing the things that wide receivers are already doing. He was a physical player when he entered Georgia, and that gave him a chance to be on the field because, as Trey told us back at a Marlowe's broadcast way back before he enrolled at Georgia, you block to get the rock. He had that mentality that helped him get on the field. But now he's kind of rounding out the other part of his wide receiver game, that ability to sort of get the rock, be the kind of receiver that can catch the football now, run the routes, and get open. Here's a little more of Terrence Edwards talking about that very fact as Trey Blunt becomes a little bit more of a complete wide receiver.
Trey is big. I didn't realize how much bigger he got. Like, I'm standing beside him. I'm 6'1". Trey is a good inch taller than me, and he's a good 210 pounds and physical. That's why he got on the field this year. And blocking, Trey has big hands. So when Trey gets the opportunity to play and catch the ball, you're going to see how exceptional hands he has.
Part of the reason why I start the show talking about this on Monday, it was a day earlier last week. Maybe it was Thursday. I can't remember. After the official broadcast ends, we always do kind of a sort of an open-ended Q&A on our video broadcast, either YouTube or Facebook Live, and people were talking about pecking order for wide receivers in 2018. And, I think when you hear Terrence Edwards, a guy who knows Trey Blount well, when he talks about the young sophomore from Pace Academy, maybe for all of us, we need to make a little room in that pecking order for the wide receiver core for 2018 for a guy like Trey Blount. He's going to be on the field because he's a good blocker, but he may also, be more effective as a pass catcher, at least based on Edwards' description there. Look forward to seeing that play out during spring practice. A guy that we won't see in spring practice, we'll talk about Terrence Edwards' assessment of in just a moment, but some other things from Terrence Edwards here from his interview before DawgNation Appreciation on Thursday. He obviously saw a Georgia offense in 2017 led by a freshman quarterback. With Fromm now more seasoned, more experience, do we see that Georgia offense open up a little more? Is there a little more dynamic passing game added into what was already a terrific running game? Well, Terrence Edwards had some thoughts on that. Here is TE once again.
I think it'll open up once you trust a quarterback, as I think they trust Jake now. I mean, you think about it, we had two freshmen in consecutive years to play starting quarterback for us. So we have Jake has a chance to be special, and I think they understand that. They will open it up more, but our backs we have, you can't leave them out. I mean, with Zeus coming in.
I love the word that he uses there on Jake Fromm, has a chance to be special. Now, for a moment, we'll put Justin Fields and his role in this 2018 team aside, because I think what Terrence Edwards says there about Jake Fromm is true. For a quarterback that was already very good as a freshman, how much better is he going to be in his sophomore season? The big leap that we assume takes place from that freshman to sophomore year. How much more comfortable is Fromm going to be this season? And does that comfort level from Fromm allow Jim Chaney and Kirby Smart to open up that Georgia playbook even more? Georgia's been about 2/3 run to pass over the last few years. Is there more of a, I don't want to say 50-50 balance because they're probably not going to move quite that fast in that direction, but do you move a little closer towards 50-50 this season because you've got a really good quarterback distributing the football? I think that's an interesting thing to see. Terrence Edwards also brings up those incoming freshman running backs. He mentioned Zeus, Samir White. He's obviously enrolled at Georgia for this spring. We'll have to wait a while to see him on the football field as he continues his recovery from injury. But the other freshman who'll be here later on this summer is another name that's on Terrence Edwards' mind, James Cook, the big addition, nation's #3 running back for the class of 2018. Terrence Edwards is looking forward to seeing him too.
I love James Cook. I love his speed, his change of direction. I kind of compare him to Keith Marshall, his exceptional speed, his breakaway speed.
Yeah, so obviously that's an exciting thing to think about. You know that you've got the power when you think about what Holyfield's able to do, and he's also fast as well. The same with Harry, who kind of brings both those things to the table. DeAndre Swift is in many ways a finished product as a running back, but being able to add the sheer speed, the blazing speed of a guy like James Cook makes the Georgia offense kind of an interesting sight to behold potentially when it's all kind of put in place before the fall of 2018. One more thing here from Terrence Edwards, or at least a couple more things from Terrence Edwards before we move on to something else in the program. Edwards, in terms of his evaluation of the Georgia offense, it's kind of interesting to see that he is very much like many Georgia fans who they see one position in this Georgia offense that just hasn't been used enough. For a lot of fans, they say it's the tight end position. Terrence Edwards at DawgNation Appreciation, he seemed to agree.
I just like for us to use our tight ends a little bit more next year. I mean, we have some exceptional tight ends, and we got some coming in. So if we can control the middle of the field on tight ends, the offense is going to be unstoppable.
So I made my point before on the Georgia tight ends when it comes to this, that while I agree with Terrence that I'd love to see those guys catch more passes, as some of the X's and O's folks we've quoted here the last couple months on DawgNation Daily have pointed out, that sometimes a tight end on the field can be valuable, even if he's not catching the football. He is that extra blocker, which makes the running game hard to stop, especially against modern defenses, so many of which only have 2 linebackers on the field at any given time. And in Georgia's case, because their tight ends are not only physical, they can also run, you're potentially occupying both a linebacker and a safety, which makes sometimes the tight end a weapon in terms of what opposing defenses have to do to think about it, even if that guy's not catching the football. But ultimately, when you've got guys like Warner and you got guys like Isaac Nada, who are both probably NFL-type talents, seeing them catch the football more in 2018 is something I think that every Georgia fan wants to see. But ultimately, here on this day before spring practice starts, the big issue for Georgia is not which playmakers touch the football the most and how you distribute the ball this upcoming season. It's really the transition of leadership from one group to the next. And at DawgNation Appreciation last Thursday, obviously we talked to 5 guys who had been tremendous leaders for Georgia in the 2017 season. Now, as spring practice begins on Tuesday, it's time for a whole new crop to step up, and that's a concern that Terrence Edwards is paying attention to also.
I think we're going to be just as talented. We're just losing a lot of leadership, the guys that we're losing. But talent-wise, I think we're going to be on par as we were this year. We just got to get those young guys to be great leaders like this group of seniors were.
And really, that's the bottom line for me on this entire discussion. I think when you look at the measurables, when you look at the recruiting rankings, when you look at all those kinds of things, as hard as it might be for some people to believe, the overall composite talent level of the 2018 team is actually higher than it was in 2017. But there were some pretty special players in this 2017 team, not just with their on-field performance, but their leadership as well. Who will those new leaders be? Who steps up and takes that mantle and takes that obligation on as their own? We don't know for sure the answer to that question yet, but we're going to begin to find out as soon as tomorrow. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Thank you so much for being with us today. Whether you watch us on video, a couple different ways for you to catch the video edition of our program live each and every morning at 10 a.m., both on the DawgNation Facebook and YouTube pages. You can also go back, rewatch the show later on. It's always there for you on both those mediums if you want to check it out. But we are live every morning at 10 a.m. on the DawgNation Facebook and YouTube pages. We are also on the radio at noon every single day at Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. We love our friends in the Classic City. We love being on the radio with them. And, of course, we try to make the podcast as easy for you to find as well. Apple Podcast, Android devices, SoundCloud, the world-famous DawgNation.com. We're just really glad you have found DawgNation Daily. Glad you're a part of us on our program today. We'll have Chip Towers coming up in just a moment. Before that, I mentioned DawgNation Appreciation a moment ago, and what a great event it was on Thursday. I continue to really have a big smile on my face every time I think about it. The interactions I was able to have with so many of you who were there, and, of course, the Georgia players who we were proud enough to be able to honor there on that night. It would not have been possible that our great sponsors, big thank you to Kroger, Marlowe's, the Atlanta Braves, Online Trading Academy, and Tailgate Apparel for making this a great event. Of course, Tailgate Apparel had the great booth set up with David Green. David's on with us DawgNation Daily a lot. He's doing some great stuff with Tailgate Apparel. You can find them, their retail store right there in downtown Athens. You can check that out in the old Harry Biscuits building. Online Trading Academy. Make sure you check out Bulls and Bears, the radio program to help you navigate the tricky waters that is the current financial market. It's a Saturday and Sunday on AM 750 WSB and News 95.5. Check out Bulls and Bears, the radio program there. They can kind of help you figure out what to do with your retirement, your 401k, and kind of everything in between. Of course, the Atlanta Braves opening day now less than 2 weeks away. We're excited about the start of a Brave season there. Once again at SunTrust Park, right across the street from where we were at the Coca-Cola Roxy Theater. Good luck to the Braves this season. We love Marlowe's. We're actually hoping to be back at a Marlowe's for a broadcast again really soon. Of course, we'll do the Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All with Jeff Sintel tomorrow on DawgNation Daily. And Kroger, as we said, it would not be possible, a DawgNation Appreciation, without our friends from Kroger. All right, so Georgia does get a big commitment over the weekend. The 4-star defensive end, Bill Norton from Memphis, Tennessee. He made it official. He kind of put out, as so many of these prospects do these days, these sort of, I think in relationship terms, sometimes you say Facebook official. In college football recruiting, the Twitter term is Twitter official, I guess now. And Bill Norton is now officially committed to Georgia with his Go Dogs tweet. If you're watching on video, you see him flexing with what looks like to be a John Atkins chain there around his neck. Good stuff from Bill Norton on that. And for me, there are really two things to like about Norton's commitment to the University of Georgia here. The first one is, and as Jeff Sintel kind of pointed out on Twitter, this sort of puts Georgia right back in that number one position for the 2019 class. Jeff, let us know that when you tabulate these numbers, that all of a sudden now, Georgia back in front for 2019, and that's obviously good news as Georgia gets ready to chase that one more time. Norton's a good addition in that regard. But the other thing that I like about the Bill Norton commitment for Georgia, and if you don't mind me, I hate to start the week on such a spiteful note here, but one of the things you kind of like about this is it is a little bit of a blow to Tennessee here. Jeremy Pruitt in particular, when you lose out on a player from Memphis, this early in Pruitt's tenure, this is not something that he wants to do. Norton had just taken an unofficial visit to Tennessee, and it was back on National Signing Day. Jeremy Pruitt had gone and done one of these speaking tour events in Memphis. He told the folks there that city was going to be really important in their recruiting efforts. He says, "This is going to be our city. I can tell you that right now. We're going to be here as many opportunities as we can get. We're going to get guys from up there. This is going to be a priority for us. Memphis is a pretty good city for high school football recruiting in the state of Tennessee. Tennessee just has not had a lot of cachet with its in-state recruits as of late, so trying to build a fence around the city of Memphis would be a pretty good idea, I guess. But in the case of Bill Norton, that's not going to work out for Jeremy Pruitt in Tennessee. And I hate to, like I said, start the week off by rubbing this in their face, but that is kind of another sort of good win for Georgia here. And for Tennessee, there is a head scratcher of what we're going to have to do to sort of build up our own brand with our in-state recruits. Georgia obviously, took Cade Mays out of Knoxville. You had Clemson coming in for the class of 2017 and taking a bunch of players. You even had LSU kind of coming in state, taking some players from the state of Tennessee. So a lot to think about there on that regard, but a nice pickup for Georgia when it comes to Bill Norton. We're going to get Chip Towers here in just a moment. Before we do that, let me remind you, we'll get back to college basketball action on Thursday. That means for many of you a chance to get some bets down and be a winner. The website you want to go to do that's mybookie.ag. It's not just point spreads and over-unders and money lines, things like that. You can also do the in-game wagering as well. And right now, they've got a great offer for DawgNation daily listeners and viewers. You can get your first deposit matched up to 50%. But you've got to use the promo code DawgNation, spelled the way it's supposed to be, DAWG. Use the promo code DawgNation and get signed up at mybookie.ag. Your first deposit can be matched up to 50%. You play, you win, you get paid. It's as simple as that with MyBookie. Hope you enjoyed Chip Towers right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
And we'll say good morning and hello to Chip Towers here on DawgNation Daily. And Chip, obviously we want to talk to you a lot about the upcoming spring practice for Georgia, which does begin tomorrow. Before we get to some of the ongoings on the football field, which may be indoors for Georgia, if this weather I'm looking at my window continues tomorrow. Let's close the book here on the Tom Crean situation. But with that, before we get there, I read your piece at DawgNation.com after the Crean press conference on Friday. Sounds like you were impressed with what he brought to the table. Is that fair to say?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He was definitely, as I wrote at DawgNation, won the press conference. And that's what I've been told about him, is this guy's an incredible salesman, I guess you would say. Number one, that was definitely kind of my takeaway on him. It's like, wow, this guy could sell ice cream to an Eskimo. Very energetic, very tanned, just arriving from Sarasota. Reminded me a little bit of Jim Valvano. I don't know whether he'll be as inspirational as that man was to a lot of people, but he was definitely maybe exactly what Georgia needed. I agree with what Greg McGarity and his the people that were helping him with the search arrived at that Thad Matta was probably the best overall coach available. But there were questions, and certainly I think ultimately that's what the decision was made with Thad Matta not being able to ultimately turn it down the position. Was that he just couldn't do it at this time because of his back situation. And Tom Crean is just the opposite of all that. Energetic, motivational, inspirational, and look, he can coach some hoops as well as his record at Marquette and Indiana tells you. So I think it was a great hire, and I think a lot of Georgia people came away going, "Wow, okay, that's Tom Crean." So. Now he's got to get busy and go out there and kind of turn around these guys who had already committed to Georgia and kind of get them to come on. And if he does, I think he inherits a pretty doggone good basketball team.
You don't often hear about visits like this, or I should say hires like this, without sort of a pre-hire visit, a chance to tour the campus. We know that Matta was a part of a couple of those visits. Of course, the second one for those may have been for him to tell McGarity that he wasn't coming, but he did take his visit to Athens before ultimately made his decision. Crean takes the Georgia job without really stepping foot on the campus. Is that weird in your mind?
Well, no, I mean, I love the way he addressed that. He said, hey, nowadays, you can go online and look at everything, just like you're there. And that's what he said he did. He viewed the facility. Georgia has a virtual tour that you can do online, and that's what he did. And that wasn't what it was all about. I mean, they talked, him and McGarity talked for 2 hours on Wednesday right after Mata had turned down the job. And then they met and talked for 6 hours, him and Jerry Moorhead and Greg McGarity at his home in Sarasota. And, that's all he needed. So, yeah, I don't see anything odd about that. You hear that in recruiting now and again, too, that somebody commits or possibly even signs without ever coming on campus and seeing the facilities. For him, that wasn't what it was about. It was about relationships, and more than that, probably, Brandon, it was about commitment. And I think you see Georgia's commitment to basketball just starting with their, candidate list, and then with the contract that they offered Thad Mata 5 years, $3.2 million a year. Kareem got 6 years, $3.2 million, a $19.2 million contract. Without whatever, there's going to be incentives and bonuses therein. So essentially probably $20 million for a coach. I think that tells you where Georgia is with their basketball program. The Stadium Coliseum has undergone $20 million worth of renovations over the last couple of decades. There's nothing wrong with the facility. Kareem said that, having walked through it that day. There's nothing wrong with the facilities here. You just got to get the players, and that's his specialty, is getting the players in, and hopefully he'll be able to do that in short order.
Let me shift gears to football spring practice, which obviously begins this week for Georgia. And, one of the interesting dynamics last year was when it was Eason and Fromm competing for the quarterback job, Kirby Smart sort of always found those excuses to talk up Jake Fromm. The assumption I always made was this is a way of pushing Jacob Eason. It doesn't seem like Jake Fromm needs to be pushed in that regard. Do you think how Kirby talks about quarterbacks this spring, with Fields in the mix and Fromm the incumbent starter, is going to be different than it was a year ago with Eason and Fromm?
I don't expect Kirby's talk to be a whole lot different, and I really don't expect the dynamic of the quarterback position to change much, because the reality is, in Justin Fields, you have a quarterback who has to get ready to play no matter what. That's just all there is to it. You only have one scholarship quarterback. If he goes down, then the other guy's got to go in and play. So I think there's going to be a lot of intensity around that position in terms of getting ready. That said, I'm going to write later today, Brandon, in a little sneak preview, but I'll have a story on Jake Fromm, kind of what he's been doing in the spring to get ready for spring practice, and what he's been doing even, here in the last week, what he did on spring break. And, man, the kid, I don't know how else to put it, but, looks really, really good. He hasn't gained any weight, as I understand it, but he looks like a tight end to me. He looks like he could line up over there with Charlie Warner and those guys and do a pretty good job of, blocking the edge for DeAndre Swift, which he did do on occasion with that zone read. Go out there and block on the perimeter. He did a pretty good job of that last year. Jake Fromm looks great. I expect him to play great. And while, Coach Smart and everybody's going to talk up the competition standpoint of the quarterback position, I don't think, anybody's going to be able to wrest this starting job out of Jake Fromm's hands, just based on what we saw from him last year, what I'm seeing from him now, what we know about him from a football aptitude standpoint. I just think it's going to be really, really, and then just a work ethic standpoint, I just don't think it's going to be plucked away. Now, Jake could ultimately lose this job the same way that he got the job, was, an injury takes him on the sideline. Justin Fields comes in, and he's just plays too incredible to take it away. But otherwise, I don't see any scenario where Jake Fromm's going to lose the job, or really any significant playing time to Justin Fields.
Of course, we don't, as media members, get to see a lot of practice. You're there in Athens every day. You don't get to see a lot of the practice, but you do get to see some, and you'll talk to people who see even more than you do close to the Georgia program. What are you looking for from Fields? What would be, as a guy that's covered a million Georgia practices, what's a clue to you that he's a comfortable freshman? Sometimes freshmen, even if they're well-regarded, they come in and the speed of a college practice can be a little fast, can be a little intense. How will you receive some clues from Fields that let you know that he's feeling comfortable, even if he's not the starting quarterback, even if he's just the backup? What are you looking for to sort of determine his comfort level as a freshman this spring?
Yeah, but you pointed out the first part of that difficult equation is we don't see a ton of practice. We don't see a ton of 11-on-11, and that's where you can see how well a player's developing and how well they're getting things. And really, it's in the meeting room where the quarterback meeting room, where the most difficult competition is waged. And that's really what we heard about with Jake Fromm really early on. I think maybe even before spring practice, where we started hearing some utterings from Kirby Smart about, hey, this Jake Fromm guy's really putting some pressure on Jacob Eason, going to make him a better quarterback. It's in those meeting rooms. They test them to a great degree, and so how much Justin Fields is able to absorb of that playbook and able to regurgitate in the meeting room, where they compete, with tests and video review and things like that about what they're seeing, what they're doing, what do you do here, what do you do there. That, to me, is where the real competition is waged, and we're not going to be able to see a lot of that. And then where that is manifest itself is out on the field in 11-on-11. Generally in the spring, we don't see any 11-on-11 to the G-Day game. So I'll be really looking forward to that. And you remember Jake last year in the G-Day game really performed well, even though, he's going against generally a lesser competition. The backup quarterback is, that's where you're going to see how everything has come together. Now, Justin Fields is a high aptitude guy generally. This is a guy that could have gone Ivy League. That, whether it translates in being able to absorb all the offensive playbook, or whether that manifests itself in your trigonometry class you're taking, are two different sides of the brain. So we just won't know all that. Now, also the other thing, Jake, there's a staff reshift here on the offensive side of the ball, and that is a very intriguing storyline for me. It's like, now, how's Jim Chaney going to fit in, and James Coley, moving from the wide receivers position, how's he going to figure in as quarterback's coach? That too will take a while to kind of get a handle and see how it's working. But that's an intriguing part of the spring for me.
Now, you had a great piece that came from DawgNation Appreciation on Thursday. You caught up with Nick Chubb, Sonny Michel, about their thoughts about the remaining running backs of 2018, both the incoming freshmen, James Cook and Zamir White, the two guys that are actually the three guys that are there with DeAndre Swift, Brian Harrion, and Elijah Holyfield. They seem to think that Georgia's going to be just fine at running back without them. I have a tendency to agree with that, and not just in the case of Georgia, but for these programs in the SEC like LSU and Auburn that have had good statistical running games for many years, replacing the names and bringing in new guys. We see over and over again that the productivity ends up being fine. I think Georgia's another example of that, Chip. I agree with both Chubb and Michelle. They were all-time greats. They're gone. I think the Georgia running game is not going to really skip a beat without them, though.
It shouldn't, and a lot of that comes down to it comes down to talent and philosophy. And, Georgia's philosophy is to run the football. Kirby Smart's philosophy is to run the football. Then you got to have somebody to run it with. And all indications are you've got that, in DeAndre Swift and even Elijah Holyfield and Brian Harrion. But then these new guys coming in, you're just talking about a very high pedigree of tailback, and Georgia recruits enough of them at the standpoint that the cream is always going to rise. There's always going to be enough competition where it's going to present itself in good time. We know what we have in DeAndre Swift. I think we know to a large degree what we have in, Brian Harrion and Elijah Holyfield. Those other guys we're not sure about. I don't expect to see a lot out of Zamir White. Virtually nothing in the spring. That'll be one of the interesting observations to make. Exactly what is he doing during the practices? Is he actually going through drills? Are they going to have him on the side? We'll see. I think that guy is just everything I've heard is going to be fall right in line with the Chubbs and the Michelles and the Todd Gurleys of the world once he gets his feet under him and can do that. James Cook, I want to see what this kid's all about. He can play the position as well. So that you're going to have that from a philosophical standpoint. Now, I also think, that Georgia's going to throw the ball a little bit more this year than everybody expects. I think that the whole, the narrative last year that Jake Fromm couldn't throw the ball was just hilarious. I got a chance to talk to his dad not too long ago, and this is all this kid did in high school. And maybe he doesn't throw the hardest dart in the world, but he is insanely accurate. It's incredible. And what Jake Fromm did last year on third down, I've got some cool stats I want to share with everybody in this piece I'm going to write later today. And this is not smoke and mirrors. We had 15 games to kind of see this, and they kind of got more difficult as they went along. So, the balance therein is going to be interesting. So I don't know if Georgia will have another two tailbacks who can combine for over 8,000 yards in their career out of the bunch that we have gathering right here. But the talent and the commitment to running the football should be there.
Is right tackle the most important, or I shouldn't say important, most interesting position battle you're going to watch this spring? Isaiah Wilson, the 5-star emerging, maybe someone else there, possibly. Is that the most intriguing position battle for you this spring?
Well, it is, and left guard's kind of interesting too, because Kendall Baker, it was there and started most of the games, but it was really Georgia's interior offensive line got exposed a little bit against Alabama, and that might have been the only team in the country that could expose that. Maybe Clemson to some degree, so it's all relative. But Kirby, I mean, he's looking to improve all the way across that line, but obviously we'll be watching very closely. I hope we have an opportunity to see right away when those offensive linemen get out there on the field. Does Andrew Thomas just start on the left side right away, or is he still at that right position? We all expect that move to be made, if not right away, but eventually. And Isaiah Wilson and Ben Cleveland, does he go back to right guard, or he played a lot of right tackle before they kind of made that shift? Solomon Kinley, there's really a lot of scenarios there, but primarily, look, Isaiah Wynn is gonna have laugh here in the NFL draft. That guy probably played way above what any of us realized he was doing all year at left tackle. So that's not a small. You got to replace your left tackle. You got to replace your blind side. That's a big deal, no matter who you are and what your situation is.
Let me squeeze in one quick final question. I was kind of laughing at myself this morning, thinking back to last spring when Kirby Smart, no Trent Thompson, no Roquan Smith. He was so hard on this defense with every public comment last year, making it sound like they weren't even capable of being a bowl team. Then they go out and lead Georgia to the college football playoff. My guess is we'll hear almost exactly the same thing again this season or this spring, as Kirby is really hard on these new outside linebackers trying to replace Davin and Lorenzo, inside linebackers trying to replace Roquan, somebody joining DeAndre Baker, cornerback. My guess is Kirby's going to be just as hard on him here over the next few weeks, just like it was a year ago, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I honestly believe that the defensive rebuild is going to be more significant than most people realize, and specifically in that front seven that you referred to. Not as much in the D-line, but definitely that linebacker core. I mean, I don't know if anybody realized. Maybe everybody realizes, but that linebacker core was just unbelievable for Georgia last year. Unmatched, I think. I don't think there was anybody. I don't think Alabama's linebackers were better than Georgia's. I don't think anybody's linebackers were better than Georgia's as a group, and especially when you had Natrez Patrick in there. When you had those four going, and then you're subbing in with Reggie Carter and DeAndre Walker and Walter Grant. I mean, that man, let me tell you, that was a group right there. Number one in college football, in my opinion. D-line a little lesser so, and I think that's a real concern coming in. Georgia just hasn't been, as great as they've done in recruiting. You just haven't seen the number and the pedigree of defensive linemen coming into the program. And to me, that is the biggest position that determines the difference in the top of the SEC and the bottom every year is what you got up front on the D-line. I don't hate Georgia's D-line at all. I think they're good, and Tyler Clark's fantastic, and Rochester, and certainly the defensive ends do a great job for Georgia. But that's a big question mark for me. There's a lot of work to be done, and let me tell you, it's been interesting hearing the stories about Kirby, particularly at the DawgNation Appreciation event. You did a great job, by the way, Brandon. And I don't know if people who all didn't get to see it, but if there's some video somewhere of your panel discussion with those guys, it was fantastic. But it was so interesting.
Thank you, Chip.
To get to hear these guys, unfiltered and talk about Kirby and what he's like. And the funniest thing to me is that we all know Kirby, the frenetic, crazy guy on the sideline during the games. They said that's nothing compared to practice all week. Like, he's actually relatively calm to what he does. And I can't imagine what he's going to be like. There's so much work to get done on that defense. We may see him just lose hair on the spot while he's going through this spring practice, but just frothing at the mouth because there's so much work to get done on that side of the ball at all three levels. And I know Kirby knows that, and I know he'll do everything there possibly could be done to get those guys ready. And that's going to be, to me, one of the kind of most interesting aspects of this whole thing, and you did a great job on that. I really enjoyed it. It was a fun time.
Well, I really appreciate your kind words about DawgNation appreciation. I was really proud to have been a part of it myself, and we'll look forward to catching up with your piece on Jake Fromm as we sort of set the stage, preview his next step forward as Georgia quarterback as spring practice for the Dogs begins this week. That's going to be a really good piece coming up at DawgNation.com this week. Chip, thanks for your time here on DawgNation Daily. We're looking forward to a lot of spring coverage, and we'll talk to you on our program again very soon.
We'll bring it to you. Thank you, pal.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, listen, DawgNation Appreciation was a ton of fun for me. I was really honored and proud to have been a part of it. And I'm so thankful that so many of you had a chance to be there as well. I'm still kind of getting some of those Twitter messages here and there from folks saying, hey, had a great time. It was a lot of fun. And you have no idea what that means to me. I was really proud to have been able to be a part of the team that put that on. That was a really cool thing. And it was great to have Chip Towers, of course, hanging out there as well. I know many of you enjoyed your chance to kind of rub elbows with Chip. Some of you see Jeff and me a lot because we do a lot of events in Atlanta. Chip obviously lives in Athens, so you don't get to see Chip at as many of our DawgNation events. So it was really kind of cool to have him there for that. By the way, before we do our SEC Through, one more thing to kind of get to from what Chip was talking about. One of the interesting things about the Georgia running backs, I'm talking about the new ones, the guys currently in the roster, Swift and Harry and Holyfield, the incoming freshman, Samir, who's already there but recovering from injury, Cook will be here later on, is they're going to have the one advantage that, for the most part, Chubb and Michelle did not have for the course of their career. Jeff Sintel's done a good job talking about this. Chubb and Michelle, until the final year of their Georgia career, that may have been the only truly good offensive line they ever played behind. I mean, the other 3 years for them in a Georgia uniform, that maybe was average Georgia offensive line, not even good. But there's a chance that for the rest of DeAndre Swift's career, the rest of Holyfield and Arian's career, and all of White and Cook's career, they may play for a great offensive line the entire time. At least that's the expectation for this current crop of Georgia offensive linemen, giving the number of 4- and 5-star guys that Georgia signed in that position. So while Chubb and Michelle are special players by almost any estimation, the opportunity that exists for the current Georgia running backs may be better because of the offensive line they get a chance to run around and run behind. By the way, as we switch over to our SEC Through here, let me remind you of the fact that coming up this Friday, I'm going to be at the Georgia World Congress Center for the Atlanta International Auto Show. It only happens in Atlanta once a year, but it's 5 big days from March 21st through the 25th. I'm going to be there on the 23rd from 1 to 3 p.m., but of course the action goes on all really weekend long there. Great chance for you to kind of shop and save on the next new vehicle in your life. But for the kids, bring them out there as well, because they got the Marvel comic action figures, like the superhero type, mascot type things. They've got the Star Wars vehicles. I'm planning on taking my kids. I think they're going to really like it, and you need to do it as well. Go to GoAutoShow.com for more information on that. The Atlanta International Auto Show comes up this week at the Georgia World Congress Center. By the way, I am chomping at the bit to be back on SEC Country Live this afternoon, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on the SEC Country Facebook page. I have missed that. Have been on the show in a week. I'm really looking forward to being back again here today. One of the things we're going to talk about, I've said this before, that Lane Kiffin is a problem for Alabama because Kiffin is very outspoken on social media. He likes to build his own brand up. He knows that Alabama is a springboard for him to do that. And one of the things we're going to talk about on the show later on today is that, Clay Travis has this tweet where he's like, is there any team in sports that's good, that's more boring than Virginia? Virginia, of course, the 1 seed that lost in the NCAA tournament over the weekend. And, Kiffin kind of tweeted back with the kind of like, I guess it's like the sort of head scratch emoji, obviously letting you know that he's thinking. People took that as a dig on Alabama. The program that he left, he's essentially saying that he thinks Alabama has a boring offense. And I don't know if that sticks to Alabama or not. But if Alabama struggles, Kiffin's going to know how to, make some headlines about that. He'll use a well-placed tweet. He'll go and do a national radio interview. He'll pop up on ESPN and make a television appearance. Kiffin is into building his own brand. It's one of the reasons why he grows and his stock rises as a coach. He'll use Alabama to do it. So with Mike Locksley, the new offensive coordinator, Dan Enos coming over as quarterbacks coach, if that offense struggles in 2018 in any shape, form, or fashion, especially with the handling of these two quarterbacks, two guys that Kiffin knows pretty well, you better believe that Kiffin's going to be tweeting about that. A recruiting note here. Florida has added a preferred walk-on for the 2018 class here, kind of right before the buzzer. It's a linebacker Umstead Sanders. What's interesting about Sanders here, he will be eligible for Florida this season. Not sure he'll play very much. He also happens to be the brother of the nation's #1 running back for 2019, Trey Sanders from IMG Academy. Florida has not had good success recruiting IMG Academy. Sanders would obviously be a big one for them to step in and get. So obviously we don't know if these two things are connected. Maybe Dan Mullen just likes Umstead Sanders as a linebacker, but clearly it opens the door for them to potentially have some success with Trey Sanders. So we'll see how that goes down. By the way, speaking of running backs, we talked about the Georgia running back situation a moment ago. I thought that Nick Suss, who covers LSU for SECCountry.com, had kind of an interesting take on the LSU running backs. We obviously know that LSU is in the midst of a quarterback competition. Lowell Narcisse, Miles Brennan, folks like that competing for that job. Nick Suss says that he thinks that the LSU running back situation may actually be a more interesting competition this spring. Check that at SECCountry.com. We'll talk more about that on SEC Country Live this afternoon. By the way, congratulations to Kentucky and Texas A&M, the two SEC teams that do make the Sweet 16 from the SEC, and we'll make that your SEC through. And as we wrap up our program today, quick programming note, do we have Before the Hedges tonight? Before the Hedges, 7 p.m. So check out some Georgia recruiting talk, 7 p.m. Our buddy Hannah Chalker going to be on with Jeff Sintel talking about that. They'll be talking about the commitment that Georgia picks up over the weekend and kind of the growing visitor list for G-Day coming up in a couple of weeks. Make sure you check that out on the DawgNation Facebook and YouTube pages tonight, 7 p.m. for Before the Hedges. Our buddy Hannah along with Jeff Sintel. By the way, we do it every day. We have not changed our tune on this one bit. We just mentioned Florida, trying to maybe get in good with the 2019 prospects. One of the reasons why we believe that a good Georgia fan is supposed to be a Gator hater first and foremost. Make sure you check out the Gator Hater Countdown every day here on DawgNation Daily. 222 days from right now, Georgia beats Florida again. By the way, also make sure you check out the DawgNation Daily Double. We'll have it up at the forum for you, and there's a link on our show page at DawgNation.com. Plenty more on Tom Crean and the Lady Dogs tonight. See you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily. All right, y'all. A lot to get through there, and I hope you enjoyed it. Let's knock out some comments here, whether you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube. I'll try to get comments from both sides here for a moment. Carlos Cardozo, good to have you in the comments section, Carlos. Appreciate the kind words. Thank you so much. Jason Lee says, count it down. I had a chance to meet Jason the other day. It was a nice thing to be able to do. Yeah, we count it down for the Gator Hater Countdown every single day. Stacy Goebel with some kind words. It says the exposure that DawgNation is providing UGA football is definitely having an impact on recruiting. Therefore, the product on the field as well. Thanks for all of you're doing as a program. We love you all so much. Stacy, really appreciate that. It's really nice for you to say. Michael Morrow says, I think the consistency at offensive coordinator for Georgia could be an advantage for our offense. Yeah, I think so as well. I think that, Michael, I think that Jim Chaney proved something last season. I think he proved that he was better than what he showed in 2016. Here on this program, we thought that he would. Now, Chaney, still not perfect. You can point the moments when he maybe could have done things a little bit differently. I know a lot of folks will kind of key on that national championship game and say, why didn't Sonny Michel get more carries that day? You know, maybe too many for Chubb, not enough for Michel. I don't know if that criticism sticks to a Chaney or not, but I do believe that year 3 of Chaney could be good for the Georgia offense. I certainly think he's going to have a comfort level with Jake Fromm, and Fromm, I think, is going to have a comfort level with him. Philip Sharp says, you guys are quick to praise Fromm, but everyone seems to put limitations on Field. You need to hold your powder and watch Fields and G-Day game for Fields' progress. So, Philip, I want to be very clear about this. I don't put any limitations on Justin Fields. If there was no Jake Fromm, I think there's a chance that Georgia's just fine. If there is no Fromm, I think that Georgia, with a freshman quarterback like Justin Fields, based on what I think I know about him and based on what he'd have playing around him, I think Georgia might just be fine. But I think the one thing that we point to, though, here is that what makes Fields' situation different than other freshman quarterback in the SEC is that there is already a very good quarterback who's only going to get better. And that's the thing when it comes to the evaluation of Fields. There is no evaluation for me in terms of what I think his limitations might be. The truth is, I don't know what his limitations are because we haven't seen him yet. But what I do know is it's going to be a lot harder for Fields in 2018 than it was for Fromm in 2017 because beating out Jacob Eason was a lot easier than beating out Jake Fromm's going to be. Fromm played last season much better than Eason had played in 2016. Much better. Yards per attempt, way higher. Command and control of the Georgia offense, way better. Fromm is just a tough guy to beat out. he's only going to get better. It's not a static thing with Fromm either. He's improving here. So Georgia's got a quarterback in Justin Fields who may be a freshman phenom. But when Jalen Hurts became freshman quarterback at Alabama, he didn't have anybody that was that great to beat out. When Tua Tagovailoa unseated unseated Hurts in the national championship game, honestly, unseating Hurts wasn't that tough to do because Hurts was kind of struggling a little bit. Bentley at South Carolina, Drew Lock when he won the job at Missouri. All these freshman quarterbacks who at one point in time played well in the SEC, the guy they beat out just wasn't necessarily that great. But Fromm may be a great quarterback. I mean, Terrence Edwards used the word special a moment ago. Special is sort of a small class. There's only a few people that can belong in that category. I think there's a chance that Fromm does belong in that category. Now, does that mean that we exclude any kind of role for a Justin Fields? No, I don't think so. I think that Fields can still have his role in this team, and he may get to play plenty given the fact that Georgia may be winning these games by 40 and 50 points. And he may also just be good enough that you got to find an opportunity for him to play somewhere. Maybe not. It's not even like special circumstances. It's just sort of a designated series. You give him his series to start the second quarter like some teams have done in the past. Maybe you have to do something like that. But my evaluation of the two quarterbacks is not so much on here's how Fields is going to be limited. Fields' only limitation may be the fact that there is a very good player in front of him. Jason Lee says, if Fields takes the job away from Fromm, oh my goodness, I won't be able to contain the excitement for the season. If Fromm beats out Fields even better, I expect a better season from last year. Either way, we're in a great place at quarterback. And that's the truth. Jason, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, that overall, I think Georgia, and I don't mean this is disrespectful to Jacob Eason because I think Eason deserves a lot of credit for how he handled himself this season. But overall, Fromm and Fields is a better tandem than Fromm and Eason was. At least that's what I believe. Eric Moody says, can't understand how some of y'all are turning on Fromm. And so, Eric, we talked about this back during the Eason-Fromm, situation as well during the season. I was constantly challenging DawgNation not to allow this to become any kind of quarterback controversy. It's one thing to have an opinion. It's one thing to prefer Fields to Fromm. Even sight unseen, I don't mind you doing that. Some of you are from Kennesaw, maybe you like Fields. Some of you just like the idea of a dual-threat quarterback. Some of you saw him play in high school, and you know what your eyes are telling you. I get all of that. There's nothing wrong with preferring one quarterback to the other. There really isn't. But I am going to do my part here on DawgNation Daily. As much as this platform gives me the opportunity to have some sort of influence, I am going to do my part to make sure that this never turns into any kind of controversy, because this is potentially two very good quarterbacks having a very intense competition. But, hopefully your preference as to which quarterback, you want to see doesn't cause you to say something negative about the other guy or negative about the other fans who may feel differently. One of my favorite things about DawgNation Daily is that our comment section is a welcoming place. It's the kind of place where people come in, have a good time, and feel really good about a Georgia football conversation. Quarterback stuff can be a little tricky sometimes, but we're going to really do our part to make sure that the conversation always stays, very positive, I guess, is for lack of a better word. Maurice Carter says Fromm and Fields are two different types of quarterbacks. Everyone's going to see the difference soon. They're both going to have their chance to put it on display. There's no doubt about that. Vernon Luzier says, but Eason did not have a decent offensive line. Fromm has a very good offensive line as well. Fields, it's going to be interesting for sure. Vernon, that's a fair point. If Eason's coming into Georgia now, maybe it all works out for him totally different. J.C. Howell says, give a shout-out to our male and female Diamond Dogs. Yeah. So, that's one of the things that we do on our DawgNation Daily Double each and every day. We are going to get back to doing those again this week. We did a lot of basketball on the regular show last week, so there wasn't as much opportunity for, Daily Double content, to be honest with you. But today we will get back to do that, and we will give a shout-out. A lot of you hit me up on Twitter about this. The softball team taking care of Florida. The baseball team taking 2 or 3 from Alabama. So, we'll shout out the Diamond Dogs in our Daily Double today for sure. Darian Ford says, so would you sit Deshaun Watson for Fields? I think this is one of the, and he may be commenting towards somebody else's comment. I think this is one of those things where, in terms of Fields being the next Deshaun Watson, if that's true, then we're going to find that out. I mean, you can't what's that line from the Bible? A city on a hill can't be hidden. I think it's the same way with Justin Fields. If he's the next Deshaun Watson, you're not gonna be able to keep that thing covered up. That's gonna be a secret that gets out pretty quick, even in limited action during the spring. Molly Moy Squire says, sadly, we missed the DawgNation event, but had a great time watching the Lady Bulldogs this weekend. Good to hear. My teenager basketball-loving girls were totally starstruck to get a quick picture with Mackenzie Ingram. Yeah. Lady Dogs actually played tonight against Duke. I think it's 7 p.m. now. I think they changed the time. I think it was originally supposed to be 6:30. They moved it to 7 p.m. now. So Lady Dogs hosting Duke tonight with a chance to advance in the NCAA tournament. Let me shout out on the YouTube page here for a moment. Give me a second to pull this up, y'all. Make sure I take care of our YouTube folks over here. So it looks like Alabama troll in there. Y'all gotta not. Y'all can't worry about that stuff. I'm just telling you right now. I've said this before. DawgNation Daily is a somewhat unique show in that it's about one team with a very big audience. Opposing fan base are just going to notice that, and they just are. You know, they hear about the show from SEC Country Live or whatever like that. They're going to come over here and try to get y'all stirred up. It never bothers me. It shouldn't bother you as well. So yeah, don't feed that troll, and everything will be fine. Everything will go away. But I do apologize that your viewing experience has been impacted by that. Brad Christian says, what team, if any, this is on YouTube. Thanks, Brad. He says, what team, if any, do you think Georgia loses to this year and the overall record? So I'm not quite sure that I'm ready to officially go on the record with this, but I don't mind telling you my early thoughts. I mean, I'm never going to pick any team to go undefeated because the odds are over the course of a 12-game season, you're going to lose at some point in time. I mean, math is sort of a funny thing. You know, you can take a series of games in which you have more than a 90% chance of winning. Your chances of winning all of them are only about 50-50. So there's really no team in college football that has a better than 50% chance of going undefeated. And almost every team has a far less than 50% chance of going undefeated. So if we agree that mathematically it's likely that Georgia loses somewhere, where are the spots where that's most likely to happen? Obviously, the road game at LSU looms as one of the tougher games, but Georgia was going to be a point spread favorite there. The home game against Auburn, Georgia's probably also, I would say, a favorite there, although Auburn's going to be, I think, pretty good. So for me, those are really two of your, really two of your only even conceivable losses, which is not to say that Georgia couldn't be surprised at some point in time. But, you know, the only two games that look really, you know, potentially tough on paper at LSU and then home versus Auburn. Now, one of the things I always kind of pay attention to is where are our potential tough back-to-back games? You know, and one of the things that Georgia kind of catches a break with this season is every kind of tough road game, you don't really have that many tough back-to-back instances. For instance, week 2 at South Carolina, that's the week after Austin Peay. At Missouri, the week after Middle Tennessee State. You come back home for Tennessee the week after Missouri, but the truth is I don't think Tennessee's going to be good at all. It's Vanderbilt, who, I don't know, maybe they're okay, but that's still a fairly winnable game. And then you're at LSU. Is there something to be said for at Kentucky sandwiched in between Florida and Auburn? I mean, you know, Georgia's going to be a big favorite in Lexington. But that's one of the few stretches of like 3 SEC games in a row for Georgia that have any kind of, you know, potential, you know, toughness to them whatsoever. You know, being in Jacksonville, then in Lexington, then coming back home to play Auburn. Is there a look-ahead factor there for the Kentucky game? Is that the potential trap game there? I mean, but that's what I'd kind of mention. Everything else for Georgia is fairly well sort of sandwiched between, you know, fairly manageable games. I'm not telling you this is the easiest schedule in the country this season, but it is a schedule for Georgia that does set up well for it to do something if it can put together the kind of team that makes that possible. Let me go back to Facebook here to get a couple comments before we get ready to sign off. Mel Gilbert also wants to shout out the baseball and the softball team. Yeah, if y'all haven't checked out DawgNation Daily Double, we'll do a lot of shouting out to both those programs there on that for sure. But thanks for paying attention to the Diamond Dogs series win against Alabama and the softball team taking care of Florida. We always love that. Mickey Brady says, love Dog Nation Daily. It keeps us diehard dog fans up to date with everything that goes on with their beloved dogs. You couldn't ask for anything better. Oh, that's a really nice, Mickey, who says he works as operating a motor grader in Atkinson County. Well, Mickey, we appreciate you checking in on Dog Nation Daily here on Facebook, and stay safe out there doing some real hard work. But we appreciate you checking in with us here on Dog Nation Daily. Scott Harris weighing in on Jacob Eason saying, please stop making excuses for the lack of Eason's success. If you're an effective leader, you make people around you better. Fromm makes people around him better. Time will see if Fields has the same ability. Scott, for the most part, I kind of agree with what you're saying. I guess, though, in terms of Jacob Eason, we're going to evaluate him on that small window from when he was 18 years old. As a more mature player out at Washington, is he a better leader? Does he have a better handle on the hard work the quarterback needs to do? I don't mind telling you that I'm pretty sure I believe that Fromm outworked Eason. That's why he emerged as a better quarterback. But listen, there are a lot of people who were working harder than me when I was 18, and you just sort of learn lessons over the course of years about what it takes to succeed at the thing that you want to be good at. And in the case of Eason, I'm going to give him a little grace and a little room that maybe he's able to grow as well. Terrence Eberhardt with a good idea. He says we should let Justin and Jake pick their teammates for G-Day. This is a little bit like the NBA All-Star Game. Now, this would never happen, but I'm always looking for ways to sort of spice up these spring games. Can you imagine if Fromm and Fields stood there on the G at the middle of the field and started picking teams like it was a Sandlot football game? That would be something to see. I like the idea, Terrence, for sure. All right, we are going to get ready to get out of here. We are going to have the Daily Double up for you at the forum at forum.dawgnation.com and as a link on our Dog Nation show page later on. By the way, Tony Porter also brings up a good point. For Georgia, the prize, if it beats Duke tonight, I guess, is a game against UConn. Now, we did see an SEC team beat the Huskies last year. Mississippi State did that, but doesn't get any easier for UGA if it advances with UConn coming up next. That's a really good point. Looking forward to being back on SEC Country Live this afternoon at 3 p.m. I have missed being on that show, and I'll look forward to being back on there, maybe stir things up a little bit today with some of these opposing fan bases. We'll see how that goes. And, of course, back again tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for another episode of Dog Nation Daily Live. Special one tomorrow. Spring practice begins tomorrow. Cannot wait. Glad you're with us. We'll see you tomorrow right here on Dog Nation Daily.